Guys, welcome. Okay, I am so excited. We're gonna dive in. We have people watching on Zoom and we have some of you guys watching on live. So for those of you that don't know me, I am Cheyenne Williams. I am a certified holistic trauma counselor. I have my certification in integrative mental health. So breath work, NLP, hypnotherapy, all of that is my jam, as well as somatic body movement therapy. I'm also certified in trauma healing. And when you combine the two, you ultimately have the best whole person care, because not only am I going to guide you to break the trauma energy field that we all have built inside of us, but I'm also going to show you how to actually release that energy physically so that you are not only improving your mind, but you're improving your soul and your physical well-being so that you can actually have a whole person treatment care. And that is the best thing that I can give to people, because traditional psychology, they love to put band-aids on things. And I have been in the mental health field for 8 years now, as well as I have my own trauma journey that I've been on since I was 15 years old. So I have history working with LA County Probation as a mental health counselor. I worked in several psychiatric hospitals. I've worked for Child Protective Services. And I've also been on my own walk of life, like I said, since I was 15. I'm a victim of sexual and physical abuse. I've been in multiple domestic violent relationships. And honestly, everything I do is the passion and is what fires me up to continue to keep going. So today I'm actually going to show you some of the things that have helped me in my journey and how to actually like map out the trauma that I've been doing. And I'm going to show you how to map out your own trauma, so that we can then on day 3 reconstruct it so you can actually start to see how it is serving you and how it's benefiting you rather than working against you. So the way this workshop is going to go, day 1, like I said, I'm going to show you how to map out the trauma timeline to actually identify what you are experiencing and where you're grieving in your life. Day 2, we are going to touch on all of the things that are your common themes in life, right? So we're going to look at your timeline and see where are the themes and how they are actually restricting your day to day. And then day 3, we're going to bring it all together. Ideally, I would love all of you guys to be on Zoom with us during this day, because we're going to do a lot of back and forth talking so that you can actually start to affirm your life and actually start to thrive and go from this starving mentality of why is nothing working for me to this thrive mentality of how is my trauma actually serving me. So if you guys are ready, the first thing I want you guys to do is drop your emails in the chat, because I will actually send my personal trauma timeline to you so that you guys have examples on how to do yours as homework. So that is like your first step, is I want you guys to drop those emails so that you guys have access. For those of you that have worked with me in the past, my clients know that I am super upfront about my walk of life, because that is how I can better serve you. Everything I teach you, I do on a day-to-day. So there is nothing that I'm teaching you on that can be hypocritical, because I use all of these practices every single day, every single second, and sometimes milliseconds of my life. So if you guys are ready, let's dive in. I also am going to move kind of fast. So if you guys have questions, obviously reach out to me either in the Facebook group, or again, I will message you via email, Instagram, and we can talk one-on-one outside of this workshop as well. So again, you guys, trauma timelines, they actually stem from grief counseling. And the really cool thing about grief counseling is that it is all resolved around emotional wellness, right? So mental health, usually you think about like schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, things of that nature, but no one actually understands that your emotional wellness is way different and has a whole other life spring than what your brain is cooking inside of you, right? So grief counseling actually only focuses on your emotions, where if you go to a traditional psychologist, they're usually like, tell me how you're feeling. Let's talk about your problems today, right? So grief counselor is like, I don't care about your symptoms. I want to talk about your emotions and how your emotions are actually dictating your day. And it goes hand in hand with trauma, because your trauma stems your emotions. Our thoughts are only meant to be thought. Our feelings are only meant to be felt, but sometimes they dictate the two, and it drives us all super bonkers inside. So the trauma timelines, as I mentioned, are designed to help you discover what losses have occurred in your life and which of them are most restricting to your day-to-day, right? So in life, we're taught to minimize our emotions. We're taught to also minimize the losses we have because people are not comfortable with negative feelings, right? So I have two kids, and I know when I was growing up, my parents did this to me as well, is the first thing you want to tell your kids is to stop crying, right? Go to your room. I don't want to hear you crying. I'm going to spank you. I'm going to give you something to cry about. You're crying for no reason. You're being emotional, all the things. But what we're actually doing is we're teaching our kids to not know how to properly express their emotions. We're also teaching our kids to internalize them to where they're not going to be able to have someone to comfort them when they actually need help. And sometimes we see that in adulthood to where we just want to isolate ourselves because we don't want to be a burden to other people. And that was stemmed into us and is now known as generational trauma because our parents were too uncomfortable to deal with the noises and the tantrums and all the things, right? So trauma work is ultimately relearning all of the negative habits that we have been taught through our childhood and through our adulthood and reframing it and ultimately reparenting ourselves so that we can be the best versions of ourselves, right? So one of the biggest things that we always do is we minimize our losses, right? So I used to cry about shoes until I met a person who was poor and had zero shoes, right? I cried because I didn't want to eat, but yet there's kids in Africa who are starving, right? We always try to compare our losses to make us feel good so that we're not showing the emotions we should be showed or should be showing, but ultimately those are our feelings and we have to validate them no matter how big or how small because they matter to you. And when you start to minimize them, you're actually starting to be more detrimental to yourself because you're not giving yourself permission to feel the feelings. So I am that person that's known to make people cry because I want you to express those feelings and I want you to actually start to give yourself permission to feel that feeling. So moving on through these 3 days, we're going to open the Pandora box that you guys have kept closed. And I want you guys to be aware that you're probably going to start having really vivid dreams or nightmares. You're going to get triggered at things that may not have actually triggered you before. You're probably going to have random crying spells and feel emotions and energies that you've never once felt. And that is okay, right? You have to give yourself permission to feel those feelings that you've been repressing this entire time. So if you guys have paper with you, I would love for you guys to take out paper. If not, that's okay. But I'm actually going to walk you through how to actually do a trauma timeline. Again, make sure you drop those emails so that I can send you the example of what it could look like. So I am going to walk you through mine. Hopefully everyone can see this. So this is my trauma timeline, right? So ultimately what you're going to do, you're going to draw a line like this from your birthday all the way to present day. So whatever your birthday is, mine is May of 1996 to October of 2022. Everything in between is going to be any moment of grief. It could be something as simple as you being 2 years old, dropping ice cream on the floor and internalizing it like your world was ending. It could be you losing the most precious, important stuffed animal and internalizing it like a loss of a family member. So it doesn't matter how significant, that's going to vary from person to person. Just know that any grief moment is valid, right? So you're also going to draw the lines. You notice that some lines are smaller and some lines are larger, right? That dictates the severity of it. So these smaller lines means that they were impactful, but not as impactful as maybe being sexually abused, right? Maybe my dad moving out of state and working out of state a bunch of times is less significant than being in a domestic violence relationship. Or maybe being bullied in high school is least significant than moving away out of state to go to college, right? But all of those are still signs of grief. Then you'll notice that these little boxes right here tell you how long that moment of grief has occurred. So if you notice, in the first one from 2001 to about 2007, so a 6-year time span, my dad was away from home, right? But then you also see an overlap from 2006 to 2009 where I was actually bullied, right? So I had two severe grief moments overlapping each other. And you can kind of see that going on, how some of the grief and some of the trauma I've had have lasted for long periods of time. So that is also going to be something that's helpful for you because sometimes we internalize it as one event but that one event actually lasted you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 years and is constantly impacting you. Then you'll also see that we have like little figures. You'll see like a square, a circle, a triangle, and then you'll also see like a star. And these are going to tell you some events that have been formed from your mind. So these are like car accidents, legal issues, custody, divorces, getting arrested, criminal behavior, as well as any hospitalizations or diagnoses, because all of this plays into your mind. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So you're going to map out about where those events occur. So if you notice down during this time frame, I was diagnosed with separation anxiety and depression. During this time frame, you'll see a circle, and the circle stands for traffic tickets, right? So if you've noticed, during a long period of time, I've had multiple traffic tickets due to my mental health and trauma. But then you'll also see a triangle, and that triangle means car accidents, right? So you'll also notice that during that time frame where I had severe trauma, where my lines are a little bit greater, I had a lot of car accidents. And again, I'll touch base on kind of those in a second. And then what we're going to do is you'll notice you're going to bring this timeline with you every single day. So for today, your homework is drawing out the timeline and identifying the different sequences. Day 2, we're actually going to find the common themes. So for me, even though my dad and I had an amazing relationship, because he was gone through the most significant developmental period of my life between the ages of 5 to 8, 5 to 10, I actually have what they call daddy issues, right? Because I never had the security. So even though my dad and I are really close and my parents never divorced, the fact that he wasn't there as a father figure, I still lacked that security, which played into relationships as I got older, because I always craved for that father figure or for someone to just love me, right? So day 2, we're going to identify those days, and that'll be this bottom portion right here. Day 3 is where we are going to reconstruct your affirmations, right? So one of these affirmations are going to stem from the limiting beliefs that you actually have. Affirmations are powerful trauma work, but the only way for them to work is that they actually have to stem from a belief that you believe in, right? So if you say your stereotypical affirmations of, I am worthy, I am loved, I am this, they're not necessarily going to work, because deep down, you actually don't believe you're worthy. But if you are questioning yourself and trying to find the truth between why am I worthy? Why do I not feel loved? And you realize that it's from your parents or your grandparents or generational trauma that you may not even be mindful of, such as being a minority, being Jewish descendant, African American. All of that plays into your work and into a generational trauma that is subconsciously repressed, right? So that is where we are going to start creating your affirmations from, so that you can then start to say affirmations and rewire your brain on a way for it to actually believe it. Are you guys following? If I go too fast, also let me know. So again, as I mentioned, that is going to be homework for today, and then we'll take it day by day and start adding to our timelines to where day 3, it'll all come together. So let's talk about how your body keeps the score, right? So as you guys noticed, I mentioned I am certified in integrative mental health and trauma healing. There's a really great book called My Body Keeps Score, and it talks about how your trauma is actually an energetic field, right? It sounds super hippie voodoo, but it's actually real. Everything you do is interconnected, right? So your gut-brain connection is a real thing, and it is stemmed from an itty-bitty nerve called the vagus nerve. What that nerve says is it comes from your gut all the way to your brain through your central nervous system, and it actually tells your brain how to respond based off how your body is feeling. And some of you guys might be mindful of that with that gut instinct or those butterfly feelings in your stomach. That is your gut telling your brain how you are reacting. However, because we only get about 1% of the 2 billion neurons that are transporting between our gut and our brain, we only get the butterfly feeling rather than the actual message itself. So with all of that, you guys can actually have medical problems that are stemming from unhealed traumas. So what that looks like is if you have a traumatic event, such as being abused or growing up with childhood neglect, growing up in an alcoholic family, growing up with family members who were having substance abuse, All of that sends high stress levels. So for trauma, your brain recognizes it as something that is literally about to kill you, right? So if you look at it from if you're in the jungle and there's a tiger or a lion coming after you, your brain is going to be like fight or flight, you're going to leave and you're going to not get eaten, right? Your brain looks at trauma the exact same way. The only difference is if you were to outrun a lion or a tiger, your brain would be able to tell you, I am safe now, you can calm down. With trauma, if you don't heal, your brain is constantly on a fight or flight to where you never calm yourself down. So your central nervous system is always on overdrive. That is when you start to get seizures, you start to get heart attacks, you'll have hypertension and thyroid problems, you'll gain weight, you won't be able to lose weight, and you'll be craving all of the foods that you shouldn't be craving. All of that because of the high stress levels. Your stress hormones dictate your gut hormones, right? When your gut is out of balance and your microbiome is out of balance, you start to have high depression and high anxiety. And that is because serotonin and dopamine are located in your gut. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter for depression and anxiety, and dopamine is your reward hormone. So that is highly associated with any psychotic mental health disorder. And those two significant hormones are actually found in your stomach. So it's super important to not only know what you are eating, but it's also super important to do the therapy work by working through your traumas, but also releasing them energetically, physically. So you got to go old school and you have to give yourself permission to throw those tantrums. Yes, you have to throw tantrums just like kids do. It takes about 90 seconds to feel your emotions. And because we have decades and decades and decades of not having permission to feel our feelings, we actually have to let ourselves feel those feelings. So if you think about a child, when they throw tantrums, their tantrums are really quick, right? So they're on the floor, they're kicking, they're screaming, they're yelling, the world is ending, it's full-blown exorcism. And then 2 minutes later, it's like nothing happened and it's like the best thing ever, right? And that is the same thing for you. When I started to give myself permission to feel my feelings and to actually throw tantrums in a safe way, laying in my bed, punching pillows, going to my car and screaming, my body has actually tremendously changed. I'm no longer breaking out. My seizures that I had from traumatic brain injury are actually decreasing. And I'm actually able to regulate my emotions a lot better than having them stored in my body with no permission to let go. So here's your permission to go through those tantrums as soon as you get off of live with me, so that you can then start to have a thriving life rather than a starving mentality of starving for happiness and starving for hope. And that is what trauma comes down to. Ultimately, you have to have hope, right? And I'm not saying that on a religious level, but more so of healing your inner child to give yourself the optimism to create the peaceful energy that we all desire. And that is what we want. But it also has to come with faith, right? So faith is an acronym for fear and adversity, imitating yourself in a threatening level so that you're actually doing more harm than good. So when you have those two, you can combine them to internalize that your fears that you're actually terrified of no longer serve you. Fear is false evidence that appear real, right? So if you look at it from generational trauma and African-American descent, I'm biracial. So being an African-American, especially a woman, I'm a double minority, right? So if you think about African-American generations, you're talking about slavery, right? So during slavery, what would happen? If you're African-American or a minority, you were sold in and you had to do what other people told you to do. You had zero value in life. So when that is passed down to you, which generational trauma lives in your DNA for up to 13 generations. So everything you do today is actually impacting 13 generations, your great, 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 great grandkids that you'll never get to meet based off what you're doing today. So if you're not healing for yourself, heal for your future family, right? So when you have that generation inside of you of zero value, even though I know today in modern society, I'm not going to get sold to a slave master for being African-American, I still have that limiting belief subconsciously that I don't have value. Also being a woman with no equal rights back in the decades ago, I also not only have the zero value of being African-American, but I also feel I'm not equal because I'm a woman, right? So every day I show up fearing to be the best version of myself just based off of the generational trauma that lives within me, not on top of the trauma that I also experienced from the life I've lived. So you're actually working with things that you're not consciously aware about, and you're working with your subconscious, and you're tapping into your shadows so that they can then be consciously aware so that you can actually heal them. That is why doing this trauma timeline is so important, is so that you can actually map out and see what is causing you to cause those things. Because I know before I did this trauma timeline, I would have never thought that my daddy issues would be the reason that I was in so many abusive relationships. And it all stemmed from the fact that I had lack of self-esteem. I had no sense of self-worth, and I didn't value myself enough as a woman or as a biracial woman to actually find somebody who's actually going to love me for me rather than just taking it where it was given. And some of you guys could probably relate to that. And so with this workshop, what we're going to do is we are going to tap in to that energetic frequency that has been holding you back. And we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty details. I'm going to hold up that mirror to you, and I'm going to show you where your darkest fears are lying so that you can actually then start to heal from that. Are you guys following? So with anything that comes from this workshop, I just want you to know that it's going to be real, it's going to be raw, it's going to be authentic and acoustic, because that is how we have to show up. We should no longer be minimizing ourselves for other people's work, right? We are future creatures. We were designed to always want more in life. But how are you supposed to want more in life if you never think you're deserving of that more? Right? So it stems from healing your traumas. It stems from doing the work that you're not mindful of, and doing the things and having the same belief in yourself that you do in breathing. Sometimes that unknown feeling scares the crap out of us to where we don't want to do the trauma work because we're afraid of what our life is going to look like when we're actually healed. Right? But if you think about it, you going to sleep and waking up the next day is unknown. You never know if you're going to wake up the next day. You never know that your last inhale is going to be the final thing. But we have enough belief and we have enough confidence and faith in ourselves to know that if we inhale, we're going to automatically exhale. If we go to sleep, we're automatically going to wake up. So why do we not have that same belief within ourselves to know that as we walk through the storm, through our traumas that are needed and necessity to our life, we know we're going to get to the other side, right? So we have to start bringing that faith into ourselves by working on what is ultimately our limiting beliefs and forming them into intentional beliefs and into hope and faith, so that we understand that trauma was given to us for a purpose. All of our trauma has purpose. It's just up to you to know what that purpose is, right? So I told you in the beginning of this workshop that we can either let things work against us or for us. For me, I could have given up on life. There was a lot of times where I wanted to give up, a lot of times where I was suicidal and at my breaking point and not wanting to live. But I realized that everything I've experienced was my purpose in life to be the trauma counselor that I am now today. That is my mission. So ultimately, what is your mission and what is your purpose and what are you going to do with your storms to help create other people's rainbows? For me, that's giving you guys a safe place and a safe life by teaching you all of the things I've learned since I was 15 years old and giving it to you so it doesn't take you decades and decades to heal like it took me. We all have an imagination, right? If you hold it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. So why can we not take our dreams and actually make them a reality? We dream about a happy life, but do we actually know what a happy life looks like? We dream about the romantic, hopeless love, but do we actually know what that looks like and feels like? So you actually have to start healing. So when you get those dreams that you so much desire, you're not going to self-sabotage them because your ego is used to chaos. So if you think about it, Your ego is your baby, okay? So I have kids. I use a lot of kid analogies. Some of you guys may not have kids, and that's okay. But some of you guys may have a child that you at least know in your life to be able to catch on to the metaphors I'm giving. So if you think of your ego, think of it as a child, okay? When a newborn comes out the womb and you take it from its mom, what's the first thing it does? It starts to cry. It cries, it begs for its mom. You try to send the kid to daycare and it's like, I'm not having it. I just want my mommy. Your ego is the same way. However, the mom is your trauma. The mom is your chaos. And the easiest way to see this is in domestic violent relationships. And you wonder why people can never leave. And it's because their ego won't let them. Right? So if you're used to living at fight or flight and always stressed and always having something happening and always having over anxiety and always thinking you're not worthy and always getting abused and verbally manipulated and all the things, when you start to get that peace, when you start to get that happiness and that love that you're craving, your ego is going to be like, wait a minute, nope, I'm not doing it. This is weird. When is the bad things going to start coming? Right? We wait for bad things to happen. It's too good to be true. That's your ego. Right? So sometimes, even though we may not want those things, our ego is a very powerful thing. And we actually let our ego subconsciously self-sabotage. To where if you leave an abusive relationship, you'll start to become the abuser because that abuse is what you're comfortable with. If you were in a relationship where you got cheated on and now you're in a relationship where you're not being cheated on, you're going to be the one that starts cheating. Right? And sometimes we can see these patterns. If you're used to living a life of poverty, once you start making money, you're going to go through that money just as fast as you make it. Because you're more comfortable living paycheck to paycheck, scraping for pennies, than having an overflow of abundance in your life. But all we have to do is reparent ourselves and retrain ourselves to sit in that peace and that goodness, to know that we're deserving of it. Right? So think of your ego as that baby. You are now the parent, and you have to train and parent your ego to be okay with the life that you actually desire. But in order to parent that, you have to be able to see it. And so at the end of every storm, there's a rainbow. But is your rainbow worth going through the dark days for? Is it worth going through the rain and the thunder and the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all the things so that you can get to the other side? Are you ready to actually hold a mirror up and take responsibility for how things have happened in your life? Because whether you like it or not, you all played a role in some way, shape, or form to attract the trauma that has happened to you. For me, I was sexually and physically abused. Those are two things that people should never have to experience in life. But I know that because of the fact that I had no self-worth, I didn't believe I was worthy of love, I lacked security, I took anything that I was able to get, even if that meant being with a really terrible person. Then I also chose to stay in that relationship for multiple years when I had multiple opportunities to walk out. So how are you letting your ego keep you in chaos? Are you guys ready to actually map out the things that are restricting your life so that you can start to create an overflow of abundance? And if you guys are ready, then you guys are going to have the most transformational 3 days of your life. And if you guys want to even transform that much further, I'm going to give you guys special deals to my mastermind and then to my one-on-one trauma counseling. You guys also have an opportunity to win a free 1-hour trauma session with me one-on-one after this masterclass workshop ends this week. So make sure that if you guys are not tuned in, you tune into this community. Universe, God, higher power, whoever you believe in, brought you here to this workshop with these amazing 9 people so that you guys can heal together. We heal in numbers. You guys don't have to be best friends, but you guys are going to go through some things together and experience the things together to where take advantage of that. Take advantage of the support, because sometimes the people that you believe are going to support you actually won't support you. The universe is going to put strangers in your path to support you before your family and friends do. And you guys have to be okay with that. At the end of the day, you have to be your biggest cheerleader. No one is going to be there for you like you're going to be there for yourself. And you guys have to be okay with that. So if you guys have any questions, I will give you guys a couple minutes to answer these questions. You guys can either drop them in the chat, or you guys can unmute yourself and I will answer them personally. And again, you guys, if you have not put your email in the chat, make sure you do so that you can get my example of the trauma timeline so that you can then know how to properly do yours. So if you guys don't have any questions, I will let you go. If you guys have questions, go ahead.
I have a question regarding the trauma timeline that you're putting for us to put together. When we do it and then we start it, and then I guess during the time we do it, say, oh, I forgot something. Is it okay to go and kind of add it on later, or is it just we just have to stick with what we do when we do the homework?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question, and you can always add to it, which honestly I expect you guys to, because starting out, you're kind of going to be close-minded in a sense, right? So our brains have things called sensory support receptors, and what that does is it blocks out non-important things, right? So if you've gotten hit with a ball and you're like, I don't know where that ball came from, that's because your brain was like, not important, right? You just know you got smacked in the face with a ball. So your brain does that with traumatic events, right? You're like, I know this one thing happened to me, but I can't really tell you like the details. That's because your brain's like, that's not important. So as we talk about things and as we continue to go on to day 2 and day 3, things are going to start coming up. So you can absolutely go back and add to it, because honestly, when you do it tonight, you're going to probably have the bare minimum. So just you always have that. And if things do come up after the workshop, again, always reach out to me and we can always talk about that, even if the workshop ended.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions, guys? No? Oh, question in the chat. I do have a question. I find that I have memory blocks on a lot of my childhood, or even in the last 5 years. I feel like I cannot properly remember a lot of the stuff. It's so weird. Yeah, so that is a defense mechanism. We have a couple defense mechanisms, such as like projection and repression. And repression is the one where you forget things because at that moment of your life, it was too detrimental for you to comprehend. So a lot of times when we have childhood trauma, because our minds are so fragile, your brain is actually like, none of this is important right now, so we're going to actually block it all out. So you'll actually probably forget things, and to the point where you don't even remember that they actually happened. You're just like, I don't understand why I just always have relationship problems, so, right? So that is 100% normal, Alexis. And as you start to go onto your trauma journey, whether it's not through this workshop and it's down the line, things will actually start to come up because now you're giving yourself permission to reopen that. So if you think of things as like an igloo or an iceberg, where it's like you have an iceberg sticking out of water, everything underneath the water is your subconscious. That little tip of ice above the water is your consciousness, right? So that's your reality. So what you're doing now with the trauma work is you're actually trying to grab everything from underneath the water and start to make it to where more ice is showing, right? But it's going to take a couple of years. And it's totally okay for you to not remember. The most important way for you to be able to tap into those shadows is through shadow work journal prompts. So journals are the #1 thing that everybody should have and is the best coping skill that anybody could obtain, because it allows you to tap into those shadows that you forget about. And that's where shadow work comes in, right? So we call it shadows because sometimes if you walk and you have a shadow, it's attached to you, but you only see it in sunlight. It's the same thing with your trauma, right? The sunlight are your triggers. You know you're getting triggered, but you don't know what is like why or what is actually triggering you. So I hope that answers your question, Alexis. Any other questions? You guys can drop them in the chat, or you guys can unmute yourself.
Okay. I don't have actually a question this time. I just want to see if you can provide the author of the book you mentioned. What you said it was My Body Keeps Score.
Yes.
Who's the author?
Yeah. It's actually it's from, I'm gonna put it, I'll email it to you guys. He has a German name and I can't even like pronounce it. But you can get it at Barnes and Noble in like the personal development section. But yes, I will put it in the Facebook chat, and anyone who's on Zoom and does not have Facebook, I will email it to you so you guys have access to it, as well as with the Amazon link if you guys want to purchase it on Amazon.
Okay. And on the word you said hope, is there like acronym for each letter of hope? I know you mentioned it for fear, but it was the one you said hope just now. Is there H stand for something? O stand? Is that?
Yeah. So hope is definitely an acronym for healing, optimism, peace, and energy. So we kind of, it's an acronym, but we kind of blend it into a statement to where it's like you're healing your inner child to create the optimism to generate the peaceful energy you desire. Okay. And in a, so that is what trauma work is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions, guys? These are all great questions. I love it. No? All right, guys. Well, if you guys have any other questions, yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, yes. I had just sent a, I don't know if it came through, but I just sent one through the chat about shadow work, because a lot of people talk about it and they use different meanings for it. And I've never gotten like a really clear definition of exactly what shadow work is and what it means. So could you elaborate a little bit more on that, on like what it means within our space?
Yes. So in the trauma space, shadow work is also kind of referred to as inner child work. They go hand in hand. So shadow work is tapping into your subconscious. So your subconscious is kind of like your shadow, to where if you think about it in like the summertime when you're walking and you see your shadow on the floor, if you go into another shaded spot, that shadow disappears, right? So that's the same thing with your trauma. You're almost like a chameleon, to where your trauma can be shown and hidden based off of your environment and based off of what you're allowing yourself to openly be able to perceive in that moment of time, right? So there are some moments where you're in relationships or friendships or with family and you feel more comfortable to confide in some vulnerability. And then there's other spaces where you're like, nope, I'm closed off. I'm not doing nothing, right? Stranger danger. And all of that is your inner child or your shadow. So your inner child is a little part of you inside of you that is wanting to come out. That is your best self that's wanting to come out. But because of all of the habits and trauma and things you've experienced in life, actually is keeping it hidden. So what we do is we peel off all of the layers to where you can tap into that inner child or into your inner shadow, so that you can then start to shine as your true authentic self. Does that make sense, Rochelle?
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, guys? Oh, let me check the chat real quick.
Can we, I would like to go back to something that you said earlier, to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what you meant. You said that we're all responsible in some shape or form for our trauma.
Yes, in the sense of subconsciously attracting it, right? So for instance, going based off of my trauma, because from 0 to 10 years old, that's the most crucial developmental period of a child. So during that time, you are forming your attachment theory, whether you're going to have good relationships, bad relationships. Do you trust people? Do you not trust people? Because my dad was always traveling for work, I didn't get that father figure. So I always lacked security in my attachments when having relationships, meaning I latched on to anything and anybody that showed me love or comfort, right? So when you have that and you form relationships not based off of genuineness or being authentic, but more so of, oh, you said you love me, so I'm gonna love you and I'm just gonna latch onto you, and like you're never gonna let go, and you hold them on a pedestal because of the lack of security, it makes you more vulnerable and more susceptible to trauma events to occur. Now, does that say I am 100% responsible for being sexually and physically abused? No, those things should never happen to a person. But it made me more susceptible because that manipulation and the narcissism and some of the traits that are considered red flags, I kind of pushed them underneath the rug because I just wanted security and comfort. Does that make sense?
Right. So then that would it apply to a child be up to 10 years old? Or is
Yeah,
it just 11 plus?
Yeah, so for a child from 10 and under, they are more, it's kind of the same thing, right? But because they're during that crucial developmental period, it kind of gets sticky because if they're not getting neglect, like if they're getting neglect from their parents, but yet a stranger comes and's like, here's a teddy bear. I'm going to give you the attachment that you're not getting from your parents. Just like an adult version of the younger me would attach onto that, a child would be more susceptible because they're not ultimately getting it from their parents either, right? So as humans, it's a hierarchy of need for a sense of intimacy and belonging. Whether we get that from the people who should be giving it to us or whether we go out and find it, it's in our DNA, and that's something we need in life to thrive. So ultimately, when you have trauma, that usually stems from your hierarchy of needs not being met, and you're trying to go out and get them, you just put yourself in situations to make you more vulnerable for the craziness and the chaos to actually occur. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for a child, most of the time, childhood abuse actually stems from family. It's only about 20% of it actually coming from strangers. 85% of it and under actually comes from people they know, whether that's family or friends. So if you have a family, uncle, grandma, grandpa, mom, or dad doing things they shouldn't be doing, why would a child doesn't know? A child's going to be like, well, they're just showing me love because their mom, their dad, their grandma, their grandpa, their mom's best friend, right? So just that statistic alone, a lot of childhood trauma actually comes from people we know. And then because it's people we know, we don't necessarily report it to the people we should be reporting it to, whether that is parents, because of the fact that we don't want to get the people we love in trouble. Does that kind of help, Rochelle?
Yeah, I understand your point of view. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Checking the chat. Yes, so the trauma timelines, they start from your birthday until now. So your birthday, whatever your birthday is, so the day you were brought into this world, and then into present day. So, and your trauma timeline can consist of anything from the stereotypical traumas, such as your big T traumas, so like abuse, living through a natural disaster, things of that nature. And then it also would consist of little T traumas, which are the traumas that people don't necessarily think about, such as living through a pandemic, right? So 100% of the world has trauma, as well as like bankruptcy, divorce, car accidents, and things of that nature as well, Rhonda. So yeah, but if you guys have any other questions about the timelines, you guys can always reach out, and I will send you guys my timeline so you can kind of see what are some of the traumas that I have, and it can kind of bring back some memories for you guys as well. Great question, ladies. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, is this something that should be done on a poster board?
You can if you want. For me, I did it in a notebook. So I kind of have like a spiral, like a planner notebook. And then it kind of just took up 2 pages. It just depends on how big you are. I have some clients that do it just in 1 page and they write really small. I have clients that want to do it on a poster board because they do it really big. So it's just all what's best for you. I don't want you guys to have to go out and spend money. If you guys just do what makes it feel right for you.
And okay, so don't leave out any years, just from the day you were born to present day.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys? No? All right, guys. Well, I'm super proud of you guys for showing up and showing up for yourselves today. And again, if you guys have any questions, reach out to me. I will go out and send those emails to you guys right now so that you guys have them and so that I don't forget. And then if you guys have anything that comes up, again, reach out to me. I will put my Voxer in the email so that you guys can message me through Voxer. If not, you guys have me on Facebook and Instagram, so you guys can message me on there too. Some of you guys have my personal cell, so you guys can reach me on my cell phone also. And if you guys have any other questions, like I said, don't hesitate. There is no such thing as a stupid question. And I want to be able to serve you guys the best of my ability. So I am wishing you guys all good vibes and to continue to thrive in life. And I will see you guys again tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.